some of you know, maybe others don't, I'm the director of the Arts Institute, and I'm very pleased to welcome you all here. As you, or maybe some of you know, actually, since I came to this position like over a year ago now, one of the things I wanted to do is to really bring in, articulate. It was already there, but articulate more and emphasize more, put a lens on, if you like, or light on arts research. Partly because of the interesting stuff that happens at this university, but also because in the sector, as some of our colleagues will tell you here, there is an emphasis in trying to bring forward and articulate, define, discuss what merit arts research is all about, even though we do it all the time. So I mean, this is one of the first, and I'm hoping, of many encounters, discussions, conversations like these. And I'm hoping that it has an open-ended side to it, where we will make it up as we go. Sometimes there are no strict rules, and also we can appreciate the diversity of angles and directions that we come from in what we call arts research. So, hence the title, what does arts research look like at the University of Wisconsin-Madison? I can tell you it's very exciting, and I can tell you we're not going to cover it all here. But we're going to start with that. And I hope that we can, again, continue. And that's what we're trying to do as an arts institute. We're a division of the arts. We have, purely from a university point of view, and to that effect, we want to make sure that we facilitate these kinds of conversations. I want to mention a couple of colleagues who are going to present today, who are going to talk to us, because I'm particularly very grateful for them to make time for us to do this. I start with Leah Jacobs, who is our Associate Vice Chancellor for Research and Arts and Humanities, and Professor of Communication Arts. She's going to give us an overview also. When we discuss this, I thought, look, Leah, you can say whatever you like, because we want, this is, again, exploratory. We want to kind of, take the discussion as it goes. Then we're going to be hearing from our colleague and good friend of ours, Laurie Baefsky, who is the Executive Director of the Alliance for Arts and Research Universities, which we always call A2RU. So I mean, when I say A2RU, people say, what's that? I don't know, but I mean, I know it's, so now I have the whole title of what A2RU is. But I can tell you that A2RU is a very important group of universities coming together, I should say research universities coming together with the specific intent of highlighting arts research and also sharing arts research, again, in all its aspects. This is very important for us. We wanted to join, I was very privileged to know that when I came here, the university already had joined the A2RU, and I want to kind of keep pushing that. I should say we're trying to kind of do this in any other way. For example, we are also now members of the European League for the Institute of the Arts, and these are institutional memberships. So I mean that means that everyone is, so to speak, a member of A2RU. And A2RU have got a lot to offer, both in terms of the activities, conferences they do, but also the resources, and not just for us, but also, when I say us, as in not just for academics, but actually also for students. And that's a very important aspect which we need to emphasize, because students are core to research. That's how I see them. And that's important for us to make sure that students need all the help they need, all the assistance, all the resources. And A2RU is very much attentive to them. But Laurie will tell you more about it. So Laurie is also visiting us from Ann Arbor. Yeah? I'm right? Yes. Okay. Then we have here artists and scientists, Ahna Skop. Is that right? Yes. As some of you know her, she is the associate professor in the Department of Genetics. And I've worked with her actually in very interesting situations, including a jury. She'll tell you all about it. I'm not going to reveal any secrets here. And also we have our good friend Sherry Wagner-Henry, who is the director of the Bolz Center for Arts Administration. I should say that the Arts Institute actually is looking at, since I came here, I tried to rationalize what we do. And there are what I call 5 nodes. One is arts research, the other one is integrated arts. There's also arts enterprise and innovation, which is where we work very closely with the Bolz. There's also the arts, global arts, where we're trying to kind of look at more the international aspect of that. And last but not least, there is the community, arts in the community, which, as you know, we do a lot in terms of festivals, in terms of the engagement we have. All of these are very important aspects for us. So, I mean, arts research, but they are not separate, they are not siloed, they all work together. So, you know, Sherry has been, I can tell you, it's been an inspiration to me, because actually I was so glad that we have a good relationship and we work very closely with Bolz, because that kind of, you know, allowed me to continue the conversation, so I didn't have to kind of introduce it. And that's something which is, again, in our sector, especially engagement with innovation, with business, with all that aspect, is very important, and is becoming more and more central towards research. So, there are various things, but one thing which I need to mention, especially for our affiliates here, both students and faculty and also academic staff, is that one of the things that we're doing in restructuring, or rather rationalizing and streamlining what we do, is that we are encouraging the development and also offering an infrastructure for the development of what we're calling research groups or research interest groups. Originally we used to call them clusters, but now I realize that cluster is another word which is used in a different context in this university. And that's sort of, we sent out an email, which Kate sent out an email, and where we detail what we're offering by way of support, working very closely with Ria as well. And I'm hoping that, I mean, you know, that thing will start developing. I mean, we already have actually colleagues who are working with us. We also have very strong support in terms of grant administration. We have a new grant administrator, Ahna. I always embarrass Ahna. I never heard of Ahna, because I'm very proud of having her with our team. And that's kind of already doing a lot of, you know, having an effect, because we've got colleagues. And the key is interdisciplinary arts. We have colleagues coming from different disciplines coming together, and we try to kind of help them with that. So, I mean, we don't help as such, I mean, we facilitate. That's my favorite word. So that's something which you should keep in mind, and we've been thinking about all sorts of things, and so watch out for those emails from us, and also watch out for example, one of the things we want to do, and we're doing already, is that we offer information, continuous information of opportunities for grant applications, or opportunities for external funding. In the arts, external funding is not normally the thing. People prefer to go for internal funding. External funding, but in the sector, is becoming more and more important. We are no less than the sciences in terms of having that kind of sort of those opportunities. And they are there if you look for them. And we're trying to help by actually giving updated lists of these kind of opportunities. And if people want to have, you know, have questions, we can lead them into certain areas. We can't write everything for you, but I mean, we can help. And that's the idea. So I mean, this and all these initiatives are all part and parcel of this kind of drive towards becoming, having more of a conversation, more of a cross-disciplinary conversation about research, but obviously from the perspective of the arts in all their diversity.
I work in the Office of the Vice Chancellor for Research. UW is unique in having a person in the Chief Research Officer's team that's devoted to arts and humanities. In most places, that's not the case. So we're lucky in that way, and I think it's part of a great tradition at UW. It has some drawbacks, which I'll talk about in a minute, but what my job basically is to help administer funds that come from research. Basically, scientific patents and discoveries have generated income over the years since the 30s, and that income is managed, that endowment is managed by WARF, the Wisconsin Alumni Research Foundation, and a fraction of that money comes to me as Associate Vice Chancellor for Arts and Humanities to administer for recruitment, retention, and arts research. So I'm in the arts research funding business to a certain extent. And what I wanted to do today is start talking more generally about the arts as objects of research, the arts as methods, you could say, of research, and then end up by talking a little bit about my job and what I see as the future. And I know I have 5 minutes, so I'll try to be fast. Give me a signal, John, when I'm going over. So,
she's the timekeeper.
Oh, okay, fine. Okay, I'll look at you. Arts as objects of research. So when we think about that, we can think of, first of all, the research on the most effective way to teach the arts, arts pedagogy. There's obviously a lot of that going on this campus. Both the art department and the School of Music have programs in arts pedagogy. But also, I mean, it's just a basic part of what we do, that we think about how we're teaching our students. I think, in a way, many of us are always involved in that, how we teach filmmaking, or Jessica Johnson, School of Music, thinking about piano pedagogy, how you can get young children to feel comfortable at a piano that's designed for bigger hands, how you can get them to be better listeners and express themselves musically in a spontaneous way. Or Li Xiaoping's has developed a whole method for teaching dance, which involves protecting the body, how you, as a dancer, you can prepare yourself for a long career. And so I mean, that's how we teach dance here. So, I mean, those kinds of things are research, I think. They're part of arts pedagogy, and they're not only done by scientists in curriculum and instruction, but by artists in the classroom. So that's one thing. I also think that something that we are starting to do, and that we probably want to think about doing more, is research on the impact of the arts on human health, well-being, and cognition. This is something that the NEA has developed as a new call for arts research labs, where social scientists, behavioral scientists can work with artists to, to explore the benefits of the arts. And that kind of work, I think we're very well poised to do here, given the huge, biological, biomedical infrastructure at this university, the huge education infrastructure, and I hope that we see some more grants, and I'd be happy to work with anyone who's interested in that. I also, though, I mean, while I think that's something we should be going for and something we could excel at as a campus, I also personally have some doubts that the social scientists are going to tell me anything about the benefits of the arts that we as practicing artists or art historians don't already know. So I always am a little bit leery about the idea that we need scientific validation for the importance of the arts. I mean, I think the arts are great and they don't need validation. They're just part of life. But anyway, but I do think we should be going for these grants, however we could do it. Finally, obviously there's a lot of research on the history and context of artistic production in Asia, in the Islamic world, and obviously in Europe and the States. And that research is done in the Department of Art History, but also in places like the Chazen, which is actually, I mean, curators are doing artistic research. And we also have an emerging program within art history on curatorship for our students. And all that, I think, counts as research on the history of art, and art is therefore an object of research. So, am I doing okay? Research methods in the arts. So, when you think about the sciences, people work in the philosophy of science. The sciences are defined partly by its objects. Biology is the science of life, but also by its methods, right? There's a scientific method. It involves ways of collecting data, measuring things, testing results. We think about science, we think about methodology as much as we think about objects of research. So, you could say, well, what are the methods of art research in the arts? And that's something I think we could talk about. I mean, it's an interesting philosophical question. I feel we should have that discussion, but be aware of the danger here too, that maybe scientific research or the methods of scientific research should not be the model for the arts. We don't want to, we don't want to take the prestige of science and simply import it into the arts in an unthinking way. I think that most artists prefer to think of what they do as a practice of making, as a process of making, or a practice which involves the daily, perhaps, application of techniques, tools, motor skills, habits of mind. I mean, a studio is not exactly like a lab, and what happens in a studio is not exactly like what scientists do in a lab, but we need to kind of give that its own word, and I think practice is as good as any. But maybe you guys have other ideas. So if we say that, if we say methods are practices in the arts, how can we further develop the possibilities of artistic practice on our campus, given its size, its diversity, and so forth? And obviously one way to think about that is to think about collaboration between artists and scientists. I'm sure we're going to hear more about that today from Ahna, but we can think about the arts as the handmaidens to scientists and using the arts to display scientific findings and get people excited about science. We can also think about artists exploring the technological resources of this campus for their own practice. So this is a campus that's very pro-technology. When I told my colleagues in Bascom, you know, artists need technology too, they were kind of like blown away by this and excited about this. So, and we have some very interesting people on this campus who are utilizing the unique resources of this campus for their own art. So Dan Lasowski in Theater and Drama is doing virtual set design where where actors can actually interact with these virtual projected 3D images. Stephen Hilliard's work in the Department of Art with 2D and 3D computer animation, digital photography. Again, he's leveraging technology that is actually one of the easiest things for me to get funding for his work. And the School of Music has just built a new acoustic electric recording studio funded by UW-2020. It's got all the toys you could want. It's really exciting. They just opened on the 15th. So, so those are some examples of collaboration, both between artists and scientists, and it can go two ways. I mean, the sciences can help the arts can help the sciences. That's all very cool. I think more generally, and this is the problem of my job, of how we can further the possibilities of artistic practice within the arts, you might say, within the diversity of the arts alone. And this is the problem, my problem in particular. I mean, John's problem is different from mine, but my problem as an administrator is, you know, what's the best way to fund the arts? And you can say, well, we just need more of it. We need more money. And, you know, that's kind of true, but I think the same could be said of chemistry. You know, actually chemistry needs money, given how good they are, and if you look at them compared to, you know, Harvard or MIT, they're underfunded. So yes, we need more money for the arts, but that's not enough. I think we want to be smart about the money we have. And I don't think we have been particularly smart, partly because the person in my job is usually a person like me who basically comes from the humanities and hasn't really thought about this issue of what it means to fund the arts in the context of an R1 university. And I should say that's a really weird thing. And I'm sure Laurie knows this, and we'll talk about it. But I mean, you know, in the Middle Ages, it was the church, right? That was the institution that funded the arts, for better or worse, and that was the context in which, you know, Bach wrote his cantatas and so forth. And then, I guess that's not Middle Ages, but anyway, it went on for quite a while, the church as the seat of the arts. And one of the good things about that was it was multidisciplinary, right? There was music, there was stained glass, there was painting, and it was all kind of within this framework. Then there's the patronage model of the Enlightenment, you know, so, you know, Beethoven had his princes, and, you know, there are many princes, there's only one Beethoven. I mean, there's the kind of, you know, the idea of the rich and developed connoisseur who funds art out of his personal fortune or the fortunes of the king. And, you know, in our period, we have both those models are probably not the dominant ones, and the dominant ones are the funding through the state and through the capitalist marketplace, right? I mean, people sell work. And those are not, you know, adequate to sustain the arts. I mean, I think people feel that. And so the question is, you know, it's kind of by default, I think, that R1 universities have become a major source of funding for the arts in terms of academic appointments and promotions, and in terms of research funding. And that has consequences. It's a little bit weird. And I've been thinking about this for 4 years now. How do we cope with that weirdness? And how can we compensate for it and use the funds we have in the wisest way? So one of the things I think that's very important is that universities are pretty good. They really understand intra-university contact. So if you want to organize a conference or go to a conference, there's places you can get money, and that's not a problem. But the problem is that artists' professional networks are not natively in the university. They're outside. So I always think about Berlin in the 20s. The economic situation was terrible. Terrible. Political situation, but there was a time of flowering of the arts in Weimar, Germany, and that flowering was a result of a whole bunch of people being together in Berlin, frankly. I mean, there are other things in other places too, but Berlin was the center of it. And so artists need to develop professional networks with other artists that are not within the university context. And I don't think we do a very good job in our universities of promoting that. So that's one of the things I'm thinking about how we could do better with the funds we have. And obviously one of the things is to help our colleagues in the arts apply for residencies. That's the best way to get exposure across the arts. So I'm going to be talking with the arts chairs and with many of you in the coming year about how we could do that better. Another thing I've been thinking about is leveraging the money we have to help us get external funding. This is how it works in the sciences. There's a lot of talk in my office, I mean, endless talk, it seems to me, about how we could do this better for scientists. So my job is to think about how we could do this better for humanists and artists. And it seems to me there's several things we could think about. First of all, I think we need to be better at going at community-based grants. And I know some people in the arts who are very good at this. Lee Chao-Ping has been terrific at doing this. And maybe they can serve as mentors and models for how we can do this better overall. I mean, my office has some resources for this, and the libraries have some resources for this, and I think we need to put our heads together and think about that. Second of all, the national fellowships. How can we get people to, I mean, we don't have enough Guggenheim fellowships among our arts faculty, and you know, the more people on campus that have that, the more they can mentor people. So how we start that going, that ball rolling is something I'm thinking about. And then thinking about entrepreneurship. I mean, this is your job in the sense of internships and cool things like that, but I'm thinking much more pragmatically. Artists get commissions. Artists sell paintings. Composers get commissions. And can we use the funds we have to help people effectively run small businesses, which will support them and their students? And I think, again, there's a great model in the art department. Aristotle Georgiadis and Gail Simpson run a public art company, and they only come to us for funding for their students, and then they go and they prepare proposals, they make bids. So, you know, maybe that's a model for how we could sustain, you know, artists in their work. I also think we should be helping people sell their paintings. I mean, that's a form of income. It helps buttress low salaries. It means maybe you could hire a student in your studio for the summer. I mean, so I think we need to be, instead of just forgetting, you know, it's not like, that shouldn't be a dirty secret. I mean, success in the capitalist marketplace, if you can get it, is one way to sustain on the arts, and we need to have a multi-pronged approach. So those are my thoughts, and I look forward to listening to yours and learning more about how I can do my job better.
Thank you, and Leah, thank you for those inspired words and that really kind of cornucopia of approaches, which I think is really the way forward in all of our research universities as we look at the arts as a unique part of this really rich landscape. There's a reason we're part of a research university. And if we weren't, we'd be in a conservatory, and that would be a different approach. So first of all, raise your hand if on August 21st you were in North America. Just raise your hand. All right, super. Keep your hands up if on August 21st you walked outside of your office or traveled somewhere to see the solar eclipse. Okay, keep your hands up if you were with more than one person for that event. All right, so about 2/3 of you saw the eclipse, and almost everybody kept their hands up through that entire thing. I will venture to say that this event was one of the most important coming together of humanity since 1932 in a positive way. And how did it happen? It was the result of not only the arts and science, but of the economy, of police officers. It was a complete event that captured the imagination, the heart, and the soul of this country, which I haven't seen in my lifetime, and I'm quite old. So, for those of you who didn't get to see it, this is what it looked like. And for 2 minutes and 14 seconds, I took off my glasses in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And I was surrounded by hoops and hollers, people of every walks of life, of every denomination, of every discipline, all towards, really sharing in this moment. And I guess what I want to say is what it struck for me is how similar we are. And I was reminded of Gary Paul Nabin's quote, "Could it be that both the good field of science and fine arts are rooted in the same medium, the ecotone between the cultivated skill of careful observation and the wilds of human imagination?" And that's why we're all here. That's why we pursue the arts. That's why we pursue the science. We're in this pursuit of knowledge through different avenues towards common goal. So, what do the arts bring to research, and what is arts research? That's what I actually wanted to focus my conversation on today. And I was reminded of Martin Tro's comment, and he was at UC Berkeley, and he died in 2007. He said there's a difference between the creation and transmission of knowledge and the deepening of understanding. And that latter, so it's that deepening of understanding that you is uniquely served by interdisciplinary studies. So let's hang on to that while I speak. Today, I would like to speak about where this activity works, this interstitial space of arts and science coming together, arts and humanities coming together toward common purpose. How we do these, and specifically as John said, all of you, welcome to A2RU, the Alliance for the Arts and Research Universities. You are all members. And I wanted to share a couple tools that we've been working on for the past couple of years. We have a repository as well as a peer-reviewed platform for transdisciplinary scholarship. And then I did want to start just by sharing a little bit about the organization that I have the honor of running, which is the Alliance for the Arts and Research Universities. We are now a partnership of 42 research universities. When I started 3 years ago, there were 29 of us. So one of the things I want to share with you is that the work that the Arts Institute is doing here on your campus is trending. And we're seeing more and more research universities asking the same questions that Leah just asked. So what do we stand for? We, the Alliance, believe that 21st century problems require people who can confidently exercise the full range of their creative and cognitive capabilities. We believe that the arts and integrating the arts and arts practice into very high-level research collaborations expands the range and the possibilities and the perspectives of solutions. We believe that multiple perspectives lead to more powerful outcomes. And what we know is that strategic collaborations hold the key to achieving the scale and the momentum required for significant impact on all of our futures. So, arts research collaborations, and if you haven't noticed, the whole point of this PowerPoint presentation is just to show you really cool pictures of the eclipse. So, where do these happen? And I wanted to share with you just a baker's dozen of centers, institutes, and districts that have emerged since my tenure in the last 3 years. So this is what we're talking about. Dartmouth, there's a brand new arts and innovation district now in its second year. University of Illinois, a brand new integrated design center that has not yet been launched, and they just received the funding for. And the University of Illinois, it's a design center run through engineering, by the way. VCU, a brand new arts institute that is about to launch in another 2 weeks. Brown University, spanking new Brown Arts Initiative, yet another integrated initiative that launched January 1st, 2017. MIT Center for Art, Science, and Technology, now about 5 years old. This is the oldest initiative on the list. Penn State's brand new Arts and Design Research Incubator, now in its 3rd year. University of Michigan's Arts Engine program, which I manage on Michigan campus, as well as a brand new Center for Socially Engaged Design, we call CSED, run through the College of Engineering. University of Lincoln, brand new Carson Center for New Media, and the Carson is the Johnny Carson Center for New Media, where they hope to impact every student on this campus through integrative arts and technology. ASU, Arizona State University, if any of you have been paying attention at all, there is a very aggressive top-down approach from their president that is creating centers and institutes around very large, complex problems. A few that I mentioned here: the Center for Society and the Imagination, the Synthesis Center, the School of Innovation, Technology, and Society. UT Dallas just created their new School of Arts, Technology, and Emerging Communications, what they call ATEC. They now have 1,800 majors in ATEC. It's about 3 years old, or they're 2 or 3 years old. It's incredible. The moment they opened their door, they had students. Michigan State, brand new Center for Interdisciplinary. Johns Hopkins, brand new International Arts and Brain Lab, just opened January. Rice University, I hope they still have their new Moody Center there. I was there in spring before the hurricane hit, and absolutely they were just getting ready to launch yet another integrative arts initiative. Are we getting the idea here? The Arts Institute is trending. I know you've been around for 20 years, and your time has finally come. That's what I came here to Madison to say. So I just wanted to show you a couple specific examples. This is the front page of the ADRI. This is the Arts and Design Research Incubator, and what I want you to focus on are those 3 tags: arts and health, neuroscience, data and visualization. They're taking on a very broad swath of initiatives funded in and by the arts. Another example that we're seeing are these venture collaboratives between public and private partnerships. So this Live Well Collaborative is at the University of Cincinnati. It's funded by Procter & Gamble, and it employs design teams through a human design-centered approach using design process thinking to get at issues of well-being and health. As Leah said, the NEA is really supporting these kinds of initiatives. One other initiative I wanted to bring up is the Living Learning Community, and what we're seeing are these themed living learning communities. This is a maquette of the University of Utah's Lassonde Center, which is now in its 2nd year. It's an incubator on the bottom. There's a huge, beautiful makerspace. It's venture creation supported by private industry, and the top floor has 400 beds. It's a residential facility. So we're seeing more and more of these kinds of facilities as well. So, what is arts research? Raise your hand if you think this is art. Okay, raise your hand if you think it's science. Okay, let's say now that, and you're absolutely right, it is arts and science. It was created by an artist. His name is Matt Schlien. He calls himself a paper engineer. And he actually uses this kirigami technique, which is cut paper technique, and he works with a team of scientists working on energy issues. And this is looking at nanostructures for a solar installation. And let me just show you this. The 2 left, the one on the left and the one on the bottom, is his modeling. And what they were looking for was how to flatten a solar panel so that you have more surface area to capture more energy. And it was by working with this paper engineer artist, Matt Schlien, that they came up with this design that warranted a $2 million NSF grant. And if you look at this is the actual solar panel, and it's stunningly beautiful. It's not either or, it's both and. So another example I just wanted to share with you is, this is Gil Weinberg at Virginia Tech, and it's a little 2-minute video, and this explainer says it better than I could.
Georgia Tech professor Gil Weinberg isn't half bad when it comes to playing the piano, is it?
Uh-oh, wait a minute. I touched it. I'm gonna do this. Let me try that again. I didn't think about
playing the
Can you guys
piano.
hear that?
His accompaniment on the marimba isn't even half human, but can jam like the best of them. Machines that play music are really nothing new, but Shimon the robot isn't just playing musical notes, he's improvising.
What Shimon does that humans cannot, because it's so algorithmic and it's translated into numbers, we can morph Parker and Monk and have 30% Parker, 30% Monk, and 40% my own playing, and create this kind of hybrid styles that humans will not be able to create.
Shimon also outdoes humans' extremities. The use of 4 arms allows for a range of rhythms a human would find hard to replicate, and that's the point, says Weinberg.
The last thing I'm interested in is obviously replacing humans. Humans are great as musicians. What I'm trying to do, in all of the applications that you've seen, is human-robot interaction. It's all about how humans interact with robots. So it's not a combination of, it's not a machine playing by itself, it's a machine listens to you.
Apparently, Shimon does that quite well. He's also been given a bit of human personality, if you haven't already noticed. Shimon will bob his head to the music and interact with other musicians by looking at them. Diane Kepley, The Associated Press.
Oh yeah, baby. Bring it home. So, I want to shift a moment to how do we teach this stuff, right? Like, what are we seeing in the classroom? I have the honor of serving, I'm representing A2RU on a National Academy of Science, Engineering, and Medicine consensus report that's due out this spring. It's a 2-year report, and we're looking at the integration of arts, humanities, and STEM in undergraduate and graduate education. And it's very interesting. Leah talked about how the arts are a handmaiden to the sciences, and that it can also work both ways. And when we were doing the research, we found it actually pretty easy to find tons of these kind of instrumentalized examples. It was more challenging to find the opposite, right? How does technology, how do the arts, how does medicine complement the arts? And so I put out a call, and I just wanted to share with you. And then the deluge came in. I had to ask. And once I asked, it was pretty remarkable what we're seeing nationally, where sciences and technology have a strong and important influence on educating our students. And so these courses primarily is that intersection, not the reverse. So engineering, the Renaissance, art and biology, anatomy of dance, chemistry of art, humanities of material science, dance in medicine, music in medicine, theater in medicine, all of the therapeutic arts, humanities, technology, and the life sciences, making for the masses. There's a STEAM factory in downtown, it's a maker factory space in downtown Columbus that they call the STEAM factory, and Frameless Labs, run by a photography instructor at Rochester Institute for Technology, working with AR, VR, and MR, my latest acronym, which is mixed research,
Mixed reality.
Mixed reality. Okay, let's talk to you afterwards, and you can give us like the talkie on the difference between AR and MR. So, we always talk about, so we're doing all this cool work, but nobody's getting credit for it, and it doesn't count for tenure and promotion, and we're just, it doesn't count for service, and I mean, it's a conversation that has come up over and over and over again. So for the past, I'm thinking 3-4 years, A2RU has been working on a new platform, bringing this all together, and it's an aggregator and peer-reviewed platform to support specifically transdisciplinary work, scholarship, and a growing community of practice. And I wanted to say this because I think a lot of you are here because you have common interests, and you're not getting credit for it, but you believe in it so deeply. There is not, I was talking to Ahna, and she's like, yeah, I'm kind of a lone wolf here. It's like, come to EduFX. What's our goal? To grow a more robust critical community of practice and supportive research-based collaborations with artists. Why are we doing this? What does it require? So we're looking for absolute critical review so that it does count. As also a holding place for some of the best examples and exemplars, which we're going to hear about in just a few minutes. And then ancillarily, we do want to legitimize your research. We do want to give you credit for what you're already doing. We do want to adopt these practices as the norm and not the exception. We do want to create a community of practice where you do have support for what you're doing, and of course, give you the national and international prestige that warrants the level of research you're all pursuing. So this is the website. I'm not going to click on it today, but it's groundworks.io, and you can fool around with it. It's actually pretty interesting. So the other tool I wanted to share with you had to do with aggregating best practices. And in 2012, A2RU and Arts Engine received a $500,000 grant from the Mellon Foundation to look at the role of arts in higher education. And our research director at the time, Bruce Mack, kind of put on his walking boots and traveled the world, went to 47 universities, interviewed close to 1,000 people from presidents on to undergraduates, looking at curricular, co-curricular research. And this is just the front of the report that came out. And raise your hand if you were interviewed by Bruce. I think there's a few of you left. There's 3 people. So Wisconsin is noted in this manuscript. And one of the questions we asked was, what is arts research? And this is a repository where we dumped hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these, let's see. Okay. Actually, because of time, I'm not going to click on it, but it's one of these, see where it says library? You can literally click into any word. You can put, what is arts research? And you will literally come up with 432 responses. And I went in there last night, or the night before, and I clicked. I said, what is arts research? And here are some of the results I got. I think of arts research as perfectly reasonable, but the terminology is problematic. There are many artists who panic when they see the word research. They don't understand the term and what those terms of engagement are. So I think there's a translational issue that we need to address. What is arts research? Another response. Well, it can be all over the map. So again, there's a taxonomy that we need to drill down into. Quite frankly, it could be research into the arts, it could be research that engages the arts. I think the act of creation is an artistic mode of research. What is arts research? I don't know. I don't think I know what arts research is. What is arts research? Research in the arts is pursuing boundaries of what is defined as arts. So I suggest you all just cruise around. It's a very interesting, quite user-friendly interface. And in closing, I am going to throw this back out to you. Why do this work? What is the importance of doing this work? Why are we all killing ourselves every day and working extra hours and tagging on to research that isn't being acknowledged? The danger of a single story is not that it's untrue, but that it's incomplete. And as we're looking at these global issues, we need a much more complex interface to come up with the very best solutions. So in closing, I invite you all to come to our national conference, which is November 1st and 4th. The kind of wicked problem grand challenge that we are looking at is arts in the public sphere, civility, advocacy, and engagement. And I am so proud to be working with the Bolz Center and Sherry, Sherry Wagner-Henry as our research partner. And she's been working probably for the last 6 months with us since the summer, or well before that. And she's going to touch on a little bit of that in her talk. So thank you very much. I look forward to the conversation.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm going to talk a little bit today, introduce you who I am. Some people may know me, some people may not. But I'm in the laboratory of genetics. I do work on cell division, asymmetric cell division, but I also do scientific art. But before I tell you why I do that, I have to tell you who I am. And so I'm an affiliate in the Art Institute. So as a geneticist, I need to tell you my pedigree. So here's my genetics. So how did I, so I came from 2 artists, my whole family are artists. My father was a sculptor, but he worked as a medical illustrator and taught anatomy to medical students. So that was already an odd thing to outside people. To me, science and art were completely merged in my home. My mom was a ceramist and an art educator, and they gave birth to 4 kids, and one ended up a scientist. So I always tell people I'm genetically an artist, but I settled for science. But I ended up doing both. My father was a pupil of Ivan Mestrovic. He was his #1 lab assistant, followed him all over the world. If you don't know who Ivan Mestrovic, if you've been down in Grant Park, those are his sculptures there. My dad helped cast those in bronze. But Mestrovic was a pupil for Rodin, and so my father has learned that. So as scientists, they study with similar things, just like in a studio and a laboratory. And so that's sort of my dad's history and what his background is, the arts. And so you can imagine, here I am, a scientist with all this unusual background. So this is my basement of my home studio I grew up in. My dad doing a bust, one of my favorite pictures of my father. My father also played football for Syracuse and went to the Orange Bowl. This is his coach. It's one of the most winningest coaches in Syracuse. My dad played with Jim Brown, and my dad was drafted to the Steelers. Already unusual too, artist and football and sports. And so as you could see, the studio is very dirty, and I'm in a very sterile environment. So I went from, my life has always been this way. Here I am at 2 years old. We have art students come from all over the world, artists, musicians, philosophers came to my house. My mother's in the top right. I would always describe this as I have a bunch of hippies living at my house since I was 2. A lot of people around really enriched my life, and a lot of them are artists, some of them are actresses and whatever. Around my house there's a lot of sculptures, and my dad always wanting to learn how to do things. He was very interested in science, art, and in botany, a lot of things. And then he built this rose garden, and then he liked quotes. And if you come outside my office door, you'll see a lot of quotes. He told me when I left for college, this was really important, that every child is an artist. The problem is how to remain one when you get older. It's really, critical. So I came to graduate school, and this was actually said to be by my first mentor. I'm too creative for science. And you can imagine I've just shared a snippet of my life. That destroyed me. That was really devastating to me. I thought to myself, how is this possible? I called my dad. He says, well, there's jackasses on every campus. You need to find a new mentor, but you go research this. And so I came upon, of course, Leonardo da Vinci. This is when scientists were artists, and so I realized that, I'm not saying myself as Leonardo, but I realized that my father was trying to tell me that scientists and artists have always been together. It's always been an interdisciplinary thing, and it's been separated over time. And you're going to run into people that might not agree with you. I've run across other scientists who actually started in art. So Ramon Cajal is the father of neuroscience. He was an avid painter, and his father discouraged him from doing this. But these talents were key to his success, and he actually has a traveling show around the US. So these are pictures of Purkinje neurons that are in your cerebellum. Another famous example, and so I always say this is a DNA sculpture. So DNA would not have been discovered if the 3-dimension that Rosalind Franklin actually took a 2-dimensional image and built it into 3 dimensions. And so this is a sculpture. So the arts and visualization are really important for scientific discovery. And so what have I learned from this example is that science developed ideas that are new and useful, and this is the definition of creativity. And so if you look that up. And so I felt like I decided that science was okay to pursue, given I came from this unusual background in the arts. So I'm going to just, in the limited time I have, to share you a few things that I'm doing on campus and internationally with science and art. If you've been on campus, if you've been across the street into the genetics building, so this is the genetics foyer. So when I came to campus here, I was a grad student, I left for Berkeley and I came back. I was in a brand new building across the street, and coming from a family of artists, I couldn't stand in my building with white walls. I said, I can't work here. So what did I do? I didn't realize there was a protocol. I didn't go to my chair. I went right to the dean and I said, I have an idea. And I want to do this installation of science art in my building, and he gave me $15,000. That's the most money I've ever gotten for just asking. So we did this, and now it has become, this busloads of students come through, and we're able to show what science is going on through the visual arts. And I know the art department, I think this is how I got into the artists. The artists were like, don't you have tenure yet? You have this big installation. And I said, no, no one gives a shit about this, right? But really, the public really cares about this. This is really important how we engage with the public through our arts. And I became keenly aware that we're using, public grant money, and we never share it with the public. And this is a perfect example of how easy it is to do this. From this came this tiny art show. If you've heard of it, it was the most popular art show that was at the Dane County Airport. I didn't know the university owns display cases in the airport, so that was a cool thing for me to find out. So we collaborated with Tandem Press. We took images from around campus and framed them, and now this is an ongoing competition. And it got a lot of press, not only for the university, but also the scientists doing the work. And so it was a very popular show. And from that has been our campus Cool Science Image Competition. So this is an example of that. So anyone want to guess what this is? What does it look like to you, artists? What? What? It looks like Monet, right? Does anyone want to guess what scientifically this is? Yeah?
Plankton.
Plankton? Okay, I'm gonna surprise you. This is actually blood vessels in your eye, right? This is work that wouldn't go into a scientific publication, but it's unbelievably beautiful. This was the sort of the grand prize winner. It's a perfect example of something that the public really knows about. So something like Monet, but that you can teach them about. This is actually blood vessels, and we stain a certain way. Another example. This is from last year. I love the one of the tongue. You know, sometimes you don't know how beautiful your tongue looks, right? And then gold melting, and then another picture of your cerebellum in the back of your head. So things that you necessarily not get published in science publication, but are unbelievably beautiful about engaging the public with science. Other things that I do in my laboratory, I collaborate with artists. I first started having, I had an undergrad who had a Guggenheim Fellowship, so for artists that's a big deal. Scientists don't usually know about that, but for this crowd, this. And so I had, Chanel was an undergrad who came to me, she says, I heard you allow artists in your laboratory. I said, sure. So she came, I work on this worm called C. elegans, which is quite beautiful, and it has a skin that has this nice striation. She also was a fabric designer, and so she took that skin and built this fabric, and she did a performance. She was the first art undergrad to be at the biological poster session, and so I was a little mortified. She came out of a body bag and did this whole dance, but it was like this great, it was wonderful to have her in the laboratory because my students were a little hesitant, but we learned a lot. We have commonalities and skills that we use in both, so it was pretty amazing. The next collaboration happened with Angela, who's here today. So she was my first MFA student that I've been able to train. So again, I'm in science buildings that have white walls. I can't stand that. And for artists, having wall space is a wonderful thing. So Angela was a photographer by trade, and she came on the floor and talked to all the scientists around the floor and took photos and made images, and we have the whole second floor of genetics. So if you go up into the building and up to the second floor, you can see Angela's installation there. So this was her MA show. And then recently, I just received a $50,000 award, part of my NSF grant. So this is a mock-up of what we're going to do that's going to open next spring. So it's called Genetics Reflections. The Biotech Center has wanted us to do this big 40-foot installation over there for, again, more school kids coming in and public coming into the Biotech Center and learning about genomic sequencing. So what you're looking at here is the idea we have is little mirrors that are like Petri plates, and we're going to put scientific imagery over the top. So when the kids and the public look into the mirror, they can see themselves and what's inside their cells. So it's sort of an interactive sort of piece. So Angela, who's now a professional artist, is working on it. And so the funding for that is not only paying for her, but a big chunk of the installation and the research that goes into doing this kind of printing on mirrors, or however we're going to do it, and the mounting of that. I just wanted a note on this project. The first year I didn't get my grant, so it's my science and my broader impact. So this is the broader impacts part of my grant. It is a $750,000 grant. The National Science Foundation says, can you please put $50,000 in your grant for this? And so I didn't realize I could put that much, and so then I got it the next year, so that was really exciting. So there is money for that at the National Science Foundation at the $50,000 cap, so that's pretty cool, but you have to plan ahead, as most scientists don't do. So I've been successful doing that. So is this just me? Am I the only scientist doing this? And so someone sent me this paper, which I wanted to share with this crowd. What's really interesting is scientists tend to have hobbies in music and photography more than the US general population. So there's interesting things coming out here. Nobel winners have hobbies in arts, crafts, music, and writing more than the average scientist. So creativity is really inherent to what we do. Not saying that I'm a Nobel winner, but who knows, right? That's wishful thinking. And then these Nobel winners, compared to scientists in general, are more likely to have a hobby in the arts. So creativity, thinking different than the norm is really, really important to scientific discovery. And a lot of people ask me this question a lot: what is it about art that makes scientists more productive and successful? And this quote really sort of struck it. This is sort of what I feel too about science and art. So the richest aspects of any large and complicated problem arise from factors that can't be measured. You know, for these, it's the artist's approach, uncertain as it is, seems to find and convey more meaning. And as a scientist, my view of the way I look at the world, I come from a family of artists. I come to science and I've been able to discover things because I'm different. I grew up in a household of artists. I learn, I see things differently. And so I'm able, my mentor said, you have golden eyes, you can see things. But everyone who's in science and art see things differently. That's the importance of diversity in both science and art. And so I really think that these connections between science and art need to be maintained. So what have I learned so far, from some of these things I've shared with you? You can really use science art to engage with the public, and it's really easy to communicate using art, complex ideas like that blood vessel in the eye, catching these things. And you can work with artists to come up with new ideas, new fabrics. And then generally, scientists are really creative people. And so I really think, for me, it's important. I really, really like to encourage both students to pursue science and art because I think it makes them, one, a better student, but it also allows for great discovery. And being a scientist, I always like to end with quantitative analysis. So I found this online and I feel like this describes me to a T. I didn't separate science and art from my life. I found success in that overlap between both, and that's the sense of wonder that I have. Thank you.
So our story starts with the Arts Business Initiative, which was a project that was originally funded by the Provost's Office and the Wisconsin School Business Dean's Office in fiscal year 13 for a 3-year period originally, and was delivered through the Bolz Center. The original plan was to offer e-ship courses to art students and to host a biannual research conference. That was it. I felt like we could do more. And so we went beyond the 3-year period and we started focusing on 3 aspects of learning, practicing, and sharing. The first was integrated coursework. We started by recruiting instructors and partners to create and teach and build upon an arts enterprise class that had already been developed, a nonprofit board leadership class, and a strategic impact consulting course. Co-curricular and applied learning opportunities that put theory into practice. For us, that means project assistantships for all of our Bolz Center students, which, by the way, for those of you who are not familiar with the Bolz Center, it is an MBA program in arts administration, which is embedded in the School of Business, and uniquely is the only program in the country that was born out of a business school instead of a disciplinary home like theater, management, music business, museum studies. The other thing that we work with is undergraduates for internship placement. Placing graduate students on nonprofit boards throughout Dane County, and we do that with graduate students campus-wide, not just the business school, and working with communities and organizations across the state of Wisconsin on cultural planning and creative placemaking. And finally, the third area is research and convenings. Many of you may have come to our Arts Business Research Symposium, which we launched in 2014. And is shared with our partners at Arizona State University in the Arts and Entrepreneurship program there. We also have a partnership with A2RU on a social networking experiment that we are helping to build a research agenda, a research project, and we're also building a research agenda around creative placemaking, which is including helping, as Laurie had mentioned earlier, helping A2RU this year with a pre-conference workshop. We also collaborate with national organizations, like Association of Performing Arts Professionals and Blackbaud, which is the company that we teamed up with to do the research experiment, social research. We built a hub, if you will, of resources for creative placemaking, because what we were finding was, while this was a term and this was a practice that was happening quite a bit around the United States, most folks in universities, many of them were doing it, but they didn't know it was called that, especially when arts were integral to the practice that was happening. And so we wanted to make sure that there was more access points, information, white papers, resources for funding that universities and university professors and staff could get access to. In that process of developing that website, we've also been measuring how the effects of people taking that information and sharing it with others can be mapped, so that we're not just trying to aggregate how many people are helping us to push this information out, but we're also tracking where that information is going and who it's being shared with. And we've also established a community of practice. The UW Creative Placemaking Consortium, which brings together faculty, staff, and students across campus and across disciplines with local, statewide, and national practitioners to study and share practices from multidisciplinary perspectives. So in essence, we're using placemaking to create a micro version of the arts and several other disciplines on campus, which include the School of Human Ecology, Visual Arts, Urban Planning and Landscape Architecture, to name just a few, as well as folks from the Madison Arts Commission, Dane Arts, Wisconsin Arts Board, and folks that are practitioners out in the community. In addition to all the things that ABI has allowed us to do outside of the Wisconsin School of Business, another program was created to benefit primarily the students of the Wisconsin School of Business, and that was our Aesthetics in Business program. It's a program that integrates liberal arts and fine arts into a business school curriculum and infuses energy and imagination into group conferences and group meetings. Angela Richardson, who's with us today, is our Wisconsin School of Business Artist in Residence, and she's developed training and learning opportunities for freshmen through leadership programs like Compass, and now also works with faculty and instructors in urban economics, and is helping me to develop a tool we're calling Design Thinking for Creative Placemaking, which is leading to community development and project learning. Finally, she's working with the school in the development of the new Learning Commons, which is a space that is part of our old library, but is being expanded to be thought about in different ways, and it's ensuring that beauty and aesthetic learning are part of the Learning Commons experience. So where do we go from here? How do we establish a constant presence? We're applying for an interdisciplinary artist residency project with Bolz fellow Stuart Flack. Stu is the embodiment of multidisciplinary. He's a jazz artist, he's a playwright, he's a former, or as he would call it, recovering McKinsey consultant. He is a former CEO of the Chicago Humanities Festival, and he's now a fellow at the Environmental Law and Policy Center in Chicago. Our proposal is looking at blending business, arts, and computer science through the performative visualization of environmental data. Number two, we're going to just keep doing what we're doing, and in doing so, expand our coursework and other partnership opportunities. We've been fortunate in that I had mentioned the School of Human Ecology earlier. In part, we're able to continue offering our nonprofit board leadership class because the Human Ecology School has just developed a new applied master's in nonprofit management, and so they're sharing the cost of delivering that program to both students in the MBA program as well as school students in the applied master's. And perhaps through the Arts Institute or a parallel campus-wide endeavor, we'll continue to connect people interested in integrating creative places and projects throughout UW and the Madison communities. Finally, it takes a village and a center. This is just a few of the people who've been involved with helping us, but I see so many more out in the audience today. Folks from our Education Innovation Program within the School of Business have not only helped us with this work, but they've been the lead funder for our Artist in Residence. Our students are a part of the work that we do every day, and of course our colleagues in the Arts Institute. So I promised I'd keep it short. There you go. Thank you.
One of the things which keeps coming, and this is partly to do with something which I'm writing at the moment, is the whole issue of legitimation or legitimization. And some of the reasons for this is that historically, I mean, I've worked more. I mean, my first encounter with arts research came from my work in Britain. And it coincided with the time when universities in Britain, which most of them are state universities, as you know, they were having a kind of a lot of pressure from the government actually to quantify their research. And the so-called RAE, which was Research Assessment Exercise, which is now called REF, which is the Research Excellence Framework, emerged, which became very controversial. But basically what it was is that every 5 years, all universities have to enter the research kind of audit, if you like. Very complicated structure. But through that, you get a starring system, you get stars and whatever. And if you get, say, 4 stars, you're top there, and you get a lot of money. Because then you can go to the agencies which fund the universities, and you can claim on that. Problem is that if you don't get very high kind of grading, then you lose a lot of money, lose a lot of funding. And that has evolved, although it has always been contentious. But what happened there, especially in the arts, is that suddenly there are certain areas in certain disciplines where people were used to doing what they were doing, but then suddenly you had to quantify, you had to kind of articulate what on earth your research is. And also you had to kind of create forms of measurement, which sounds very drastic, and that's where the painful bit came, so to speak. Because whereas the scientists could do that, they could also quantify how much money they created and all that stuff. When it came to the arts, and also to some extent the humanities, but the arts, especially the practice-based arts, were kind of at the very. So what happened there is that a huge issue of engagement and a lot of this discussion came up. And slowly but steadily, actually, you could see a lot of work on arts methodologies and also arts research. And what on earth is that? And as you've seen, I think arts research is a very unfortunate term because it could mean everything, it could mean nothing. But whatever that means is that it's there, and to some extent there is also an issue. So you wonder whether this is just a question of legitimation. But beyond that, and if you think about it in terms of the United States, okay, in the United States you have tenure, which is probably one of those kind of moments where, as an academic, you are asked what you've been doing and how can we kind of measure this up and give you the job or not or whatever. Although that's not kind of comparable because in Britain you have to kind of, not just in Britain, in Australia and Canada and New Zealand, they have to do that all the time. However, there are these kind of issues, these are external kind of questions, which actually, I wonder whether they're just notions of legitimation. Now, that was a point, but actually, arts research is not just a notion of legitimation. We're not just there to justify ourselves, we're not just there to just get the money, or we're not just doing that in order to be able to kind of be seen as if we are like the scientists. I remember when I was at Dundee and I was given job as a chair of arts, which means professor of art education. Like all new professors, I had to give new full professors, I had to give my professorial thing. It was like a 10-minute, what they did there was a 10-minute thing, and I presented with a couple of scientists. And I remember talking about the whole notion of art as unlearning, which is part of my research. But when I was talking about it, I told them I see research a bit like, I know he's not very popular these days, a bit like Christopher Columbus. He set out to go there to find India, but actually I realized he bumped into this piece of land, which is quite big actually. I realized, what is this place? And then he said, oh, God almighty, there are people here. I mean, who are they? They are not Indians. In fact, we still call them Indians actually, which is a bit bizarre. But then he realized it was totally new to him, a new continent. So he discovered, quote unquote, America. Which was also named to after his, actually, is the irony of all irony. It wasn't named after him, but it was named after Americo Vespucci, but that's a political. So that's kind of, but I mean, the idea of arts research sometimes, the way I see it, is that you launch yourself. You might start with a bizarre idea that you're going to find India, and then you bump to a totally different set of events, and you engage with that. And that's where you learn how to unlearn most of the time. So basically, rather than go with predisposed ideas, actually the whole task is to that you're going to unlearn, be proven totally wrong of what you had in the beginning. And I remember the Chancellor of that university is a scientist, and he told me, John, actually you don't do anything different from us scientists. I thought, well, I've been telling people about that, but they keep telling me, the scientists and the artists are totally different, but actually we're not. And that's what, personally, the intrinsic kind of logic, if you like, if you want to call it that, of the arts, that's what interests me, as a practitioner, but also as someone who also engages with philosophy, and also with the idea of art. But I mean, I want to open this because we've heard some really interesting and very thought-provoking ideas here, very, realities, I would say, rather than ideas. And I just want everyone to kind of open this up. So we have some microphones here and everything. But before I forget, because Kate actually prepped me with some of the facts, is I forgot to tell you that on December the 7th, on Thursday, I think it's going to be in the afternoon, we're going to have another event. Is that the event? Where actually we have a lot of arts awards here. We will recognize colleagues, but also the awards allow colleagues to do a lot of projects. And what we're going to do is we're going to ask some of these colleagues to present their work. So on the 7th of December, that's going to happen. So watch out for that, email, if you like, because it would be great to develop or keep building on this event today by actually having our colleagues, our artists, our faculty, whatever capacity they are, to present their work. So that's something which I would like to put on your calendar, as they say, in December 7th. Otherwise, I just want to open this. I'll leave it in case Kate will hand. And I think there are some microphones around, and I'd like people to just talk.
So I think there are differences among well, between me and almost everyone else here, so I'll just put that out there so you can think about it. I mean, I think we need to use the word research to get funding for the arts in an R1 university, but I think there are, well, I think creativity it helps everyone. It helps parents of newborns. But I don't think that arts and science are the same thing. And I think that's great. I mean, I think, vive la différence, you know? I mean, I think that it's a mistake for us. We should explore in a tactical way collaborations between arts and sciences, arts and humanities, arts and social science, great, important. But it's a mistake to pin we have a problem, and this society is fundamentally hostile to art in a way that it's not hostile to science. And I don't think we should say, well, you know, we can validate art by saying it's just like science, or it helps science, or, you know, it's a different thing. And I remember I was talking to Mary Hark, who does research on textiles, and she's an artist. And she had been in Guatemala and then in Africa looking at artists who make textiles. And she said to me, you know, it's so different to be in a culture where art is part of everyone's everyday life. They care about it. It's kind of central to the community. And we're not in that position. We have to be honest. Most of us, I mean, if you make TV shows, maybe, but most of us, or games, you know, and those are art forms. I'm cool with them, but you know, most of us are making things that are not central, okay, to our culture. So how do we defend that, and how do we make it accessible to people as art, and how do we make sure it survives? I mean, I think that's those questions. And for that, you know, as I say, tactically, there's no reason not to collaborate with scientists. They're very cool. They have lots of resources. They're smart people. But I don't think we should say that art, whatever we want to call arts research, that it's like scientific research. I think we should say it's different.
I don't mean that. And actually, I should be careful, because actually I'm from the other side. So I'm with you. But I mean, what I'm saying is that, let me talk as an educator. You know, I've been teaching sort of primary school teachers when I started, and primary school kids. But the thing is that if we think about it, the arts actually allow us not allow us, the arts are our capacity to think in a totally different way from other things. And there is a specificity to the way we do that. There's an intrinsic value, there is an immanence within the arts, in terms of doing, in terms of making, whatever that means, process, product, and whatever. I personally, I have to say this, and I declare this, and we've been discussing this earlier, is that I'm very worried that sometimes we only, and this is why I mentioned the legitimation thing, that we only legitimize the arts as instrumental vehicles for other forms of research, and so bring them together with the sciences, bring them together with commerce or whatever. But I mean, again, another example is when I worked in the southwest of England, actually, and we used to work very closely with business. In our examining processes, we used to involve people in business. So I remember I was talking to one of the businessmen there. He was the president of the Chamber of Commerce. And I told him, actually, I'm really angry at some of my colleagues, especially the boss here, who was my boss. I told him, because she keeps talking about how we kind of, you know, change our product, even, I can't stand it, to be able to fit you. And he said, no, actually, if the artists do something different, we work with artists because they do things differently from us. And that's the value of it in terms of how we engage with that, because you give us a totally different perspective in terms of how you think, in terms of how you argument. And that's how I see the whole idea of how we engage with other disciplines. And also the specificity of the disciplines is important. Even the specificity within the arts is important. You can't try to think painting in terms of printmaking. You can't think sculpture in terms of music. When people try to do that, and they do it superficially, they kill, because you neither have music nor art. There is that kind of distinction, there's the integrity. And this is something which actually, there's a lot of resistance also in departments, not just here, everywhere else, because I see that point, that some colleagues in the art world, especially in academia, they are worried that we suddenly become handmaidens of something else, or we become something else. And they don't want to do that. They want to keep their integrity. The word integrity is very, very powerful. So the challenge is how to balance this. The challenge is how to get that kind of diversity. We need the diversity, because otherwise all this whole thing about research will just die off, and we know that. So when the scientist told me you operate in a very similar thing to what, he didn't say art is like science, but he was saying actually, he was claiming that they are as creative as we are, so to speak. So I mean, so he was actually sort of doing that. But I think it is a very important distinction that you're making, and I know that my colleagues actually we agree on that.
My question, I guess, relates to this conversation in that, so as an artist who's applied for interdisciplinary research money, I find that the expected or anticipated outcomes ends up being the part that is the most frustrating for me, because this wasn't a university-based funding opportunity, but an external funding, and the result or the feedback we got after we didn't get the grant was like, oh, there wasn't clear enough anticipated outcomes. And I thought, if you want true innovation or invention, you have to delete that line from the call. And so I think as administrators who put these grant funding opportunities in place that ask for true interdisciplinary collaboration, perhaps that funding, that part of the grant, if you want different outcomes, we need to start thinking about how we might fund and ask for the undiscovered by saying, like, there was no way to quantify what was going to happen once we started working together, but I think the most frustrating thing for this new interdisciplinary research is that they expect that you will know. It's like, how can you know those things? So I guess my question is, how can you as administrators and the people who are putting these calls together try to open up even more to get this kind of work? Because I do agree with Leah in that I always feel like the underdog. I'm attached to the thing, but the scientist is what really like where the money comes from and why they want to support the project. So I guess that's a dual, like, how do we balance the playing field, and then how do we invite more open source sort of ideas into these funding opportunities?
Yeah, thanks, Marianne. I'm curious to know if there's other ideas about how we could be fostering arts research activity on campus.
I have a sort of piggyback question. This I don't think is working, but piggyback question on that is, we're all of arts disciplines here. Here we go. And besides what Ahna had to say, are there any initiatives on the science side at our university expressing interest in what we do and wanting to collaborate? Because I found all of these presentations very stimulating, and I've got some ideas that I might want to pursue, but wouldn't it be fabulous if I got an email from someone in some department saying, I'm interested in what you do, and I'm a scientist, and I have a collaboration idea?
Should I talk? I mean, I think for me as a scientist, because I have an arts background, I inherently know how to do this, and I have to plan ahead. So when I write grants, broader impacts on NSF is a standard. So the question is, most scientists do this the last day before the grants due. So, but if you're going to work with an artist, I'm working with Angela, we work on that for more than 6 months. But you have to engage with the artist, but the problem is scientists are not engaging with the artists on this campus, period. And so we could have a dialogue we need to have a mechanism to do that as scientists, but we know when the NSF grant deadlines are due, they're always in November, so we should be talking about this in June or July or even earlier than that. And artists can easily come to the laboratories. You know, I have facilitated, I'm working with Peggy Choi as well, trying to connect her, she's done some interdisciplinary work. And so that kind of thing has been happening organically. And scientists actually want this kind of help, but they're not being engaged early enough in the grant process. And so if you know the NSF deadlines, which are always, those are published, you can facilitate it, and I've been able to do that myself, facilitating the artists that I do know that come to me. So, and there's money for it. There's lots of money.
Can I just add one thing? This is actually what we're trying to do in the Arts Institute. One of the things that we want to do is to brokerage that. Because we have affiliates who come from who are people interested in the arts, but not necessarily in our departments. I would say, the thing that Kate sent, this is an invitation to people to come to us, talk to us. We have Ahna, we have Kate, and with the knowledge that we have of other colleagues, and we can kind of, broker that. And that's our role, and so I want to mention this because this is important for everyone to know. Come to us and we'll try to kind of think about it. We can't guarantee it, but we want to make sure that there is connection and conversations happening. And we can go to Leah if we get stuck.
Beth.
Yeah, John, I love that, and thank you for offering the Arts Institute as facilitating that role. But going to Ahna's point again, right now we're dealing with scientists that deal with this on the last day of the grant is due. So how do we? Yes, we have the affiliates, but how do we engage those that are not currently affiliates and help grab onto them as well?
I'm hoping the network would work, but I don't know. I mean, I'm open to ideas. We know that other colleagues in Humanities, for example.
I mean, to me, if I knew artists were interested in engaging with scientists, I could pair them up in 5 seconds.
Yeah.
And so that is not a problem. It's just being able to have a repository, and if the Art Institute is willing to do that,
Yeah.
I can be the facilitator, but I think the Art Institute can serve that role. We just need to get there. But it needs to be done early and methodically in a way that,
Yeah.
there also could be campus grants that could be written to facilitate this.
That's what we're trying to develop.
You could do preliminary data and have an image like that mock-up that I drew, that could go into that could help get that scientist the grant and then the artist the money to do what they want to do. So, yeah, it's there.
Thanks for organizing this. I was going to say one or two things. Probably not by accident that we're sitting in this building, because the very vision of this building was that kind of integration. And although maybe many of you weren't here while this building was being developed, and the kind of run-up to its emergence, there was a really strong effort to create that kind of collaboration. How successful it was, how enduring it is, how sustainable it is, are a set of questions. But there is a real history of that kind of work, and I think we could go back to that history. There's a Promoting Collisions project, which was tied directly to this. I was going to say one other thing, which is it seems to me that there are at least 3 different, quite distinct projects that are represented here, and maybe 4 or 5 or 6, but at least 3. And I'd just be curious to hear how you all think about the relationship between them. And one is a curricular project, right? How, at a university of this sort, do the arts fit into the curriculum, right? Another one is a research project, which is how do we characterize the work of artists as research, understanding that there are many kinds of research that are necessary in order for artists to do projects, whatever their discipline, to do their work, but also that the outcome of their work can be conceived of as a kind of research. So how do we use research to describe the work of the arts, and should we, and what are the implications of that characterization? And then the third, which is related to both of these, but I also think distinct, is how the work of artists generates new knowledge, new interpretation, new ways of seeing, right? That are distinct from the work of scientists, distinct from maybe the work of humanists, precisely because of the media that they're working, the form of their projects, but also deeply integrated. So to kind of build on Leah's point, don't just conflate, but how do we integrate, right? And it seems to me that those are 3 actually very distinct projects that each of you are responding to. I mean, and behind all that is money, right? And how we fund these different kinds of projects. But I'm wondering if you have further thoughts on the relationship between these 3 areas of inquiry that seem not to be identical.
Well, I had to sort of rush through things, so I didn't really get to go into the history of why we did what we did. But, when we got the original funding to try this Arts Business Initiative, my understanding is that it was the business school's way of reaching out to the artist community and saying, we want to give you access to foundational entrepreneurship and business skills and classes, so that if you are interested in learning about that and making a living and a life with your work, this could be helpful. The unintended happy accident was the artists came, but so did the computer scientists, and so did the mechanical engineers, and so did the environmental scientists. And the way the business students how all the students were advantaged by the way that all of them thought differently, and what they brought to the table was the real was the real gift, right? And so I think that's been what's, at least from my point of view, why the business school has been interested in continuing this, because we see the win-win in it all, because we all get to think differently, we all get to contribute to it differently. The other thing that we have to be cognizant about is we're not purporting to teach art in the business school. We're saying we want to access the artistic process and invite artists in to help our business students understand how that works and how they can take that on as a way of learning and knowing. So we didn't, appoint a business professor to be an artist in residence. We went out and we hired an artist to come in and show us how to do that process. So I think, to your earlier point, there has to be some intentionality in that and understanding that I don't think for us it's an interdisciplinary thing as much as it is using the arts as a lens for how we're looking at everything else.
So could I say just a couple, I just wanted to, some synthesizing ideas around what's been discussed today. And I guess the first thing I want to say is in response to Leah that, no one plays the violin to get better at math, right? That's not why we play music. That's not like why we draw a picture so that we can, illustrate a microorganism. We do it because we're human, and we know that. And with that, I think there is a really interesting moment right now in policy in America that is not supportive of the arts, however you want to define that, and that intrinsic argument around getting funding because I paint is pretty dead, And I will say that the next cultural policy in America is around placemaking, and it's around the revitalization of our towns and cities. And if you're looking at the national funding, it is around collective impact, it's around broader impacts. And I think, the issue you're struggling with in that solutions section, is that we don't, as artists, we don't have the luxury of 6 months of a planning grant, right? Most large initiatives, multi-million-dollar initiatives, you get 3 months to figure it out and to play and to experiment. And so that, in a sense, what I would say is build that in, and also funders appreciate things that don't work. They want to know what doesn't work. And so you can amplify what you think backward map what you think the solutions are, but they don't necessarily bear out. And I guess the last thing I want to say is the way towards funding is really, it is around picking a problem that, like diabetes, we can't solve it just by getting your insulin levels right. What does an artist, that different ways of knowing in humanities, pick a problem, articulate it well, and come up with a logical path or an illogical path, but a well-articulated path to address the issue. And that's what we're all doing together.
So I have no quarrel with that, but actually I think that we do have to fund people to paint, and we do have to fund musicians to practice. Those things, and that's my job, is to figure out how to do that. Because those are the fundamental skills that artists need. It's not like art is some magical thing. It's a set of skills which are hard to acquire and take years to acquire. And if the university is, an Arwin University is going to be a place where people acquire those skills, then there have to be places where people can do research on how to play the Baroque bassoon better. And I'm completely committed to that. And I think that we have to find strategies, and part of that may be finding ways to, support artists in their own self-education, because just because you have a position doesn't mean you stop learning how to be a metalsmith or whatever it is. You're still doing that. And for me, that's what, at the University of Wisconsin, I don't want you to just get funding as an artist because you can help solve the problem of diabetes, so it's great. I want you to figure out how to make better music, better painting, and that is a worthy goal in and of itself. And if we don't have that, we don't have any of the other stuff.
I agree with you, and that goes back to kind of a K through 20 initiative. So for the University of Wisconsin to take on educating the next generation within a discipline without having that backstop of the state and with, so it's a much larger conversation. So just full disclosure, I have 3 degrees. I have a degree in flute performance. I have a master's in flute performance. And I have a doctorate in flute performance. And I played professionally in a symphony for 15 years in one of the Exam orchestras in America. And I have the deepest appreciation. My dissertation topic was on Baroque performance practice. And my deep love is around playing the traverso, which is an 18th century 6-hold flute. So I totally get what you're saying, and the funding streams are mutually exclusive. I think we're talking about, it is 2 different things. So maybe when we're done, let's pick this up. So I'm with you. I'm absolutely, with you.
But I think there's one thing which...
I think we're a little bit past time.
Okay. No, just one little thing. Is there's an issue here, which actually I agree totally with the curriculum. And sometimes there might be, I'm hoping that also reflections on arts research, arts methods and whatever. I mean, you could look at diabetes from an arts methods point of view, from an empirical method point of view, from even a philosophical point of view, and you're still looking at the same thing, but you still have the distinct kind of methodologies that are approaching it, and all of them would help. But I mean, the other thing is, which I find finding is that while we teach the clarinet and everything in a good way, or teach how to paint in a proper professional way. On the other hand, there are things where, I used to work in a school where actually we used to teach contextual critical studies. And instead of doing contextual critical studies outside in a room and talk to them about theory, we used to do it in the studio. And we used to engage actually studio practice within contextual critical studies. And that wasn't very easy. Some of the colleagues didn't like it, but actually the students, the kind of work and insights that created were out of this world. And I can say that sort of in a practical way. Like you, I'm a practicing artist and everything, and to be married to a flutist as well, so I understand where I'm coming from. So, but I don't think they are mutually exclusive. I think actually what we're talking about is a quite comprehensive view of what arts research is all about. And I'm hoping that we started a conversation here which we can kind of continue, because it's important for the university to have this kind of insight.